28-year-old Houston realtor Ashlee Long was leaving a bar in downtown Dallas with some friends at 2 a.m. on April 5th of 2025 when a member of the group, 36-year-old William Kistler, brushed his hand against a passing Mercedes-Benz. The car immediately stopped and the driver, 34-year-old Kendrick Finch, exited the vehicle. As Kistler reached into Long's purse for a gun, Finch opened fire on the group, shooting both Kistler and Long. Kistler survived and Long died from her injuries at a nearby hospital. Surveillance footage showed Long trying to pull Kistler away from a confrontation that occurred before Kistler touched Finch's car. Finch fled the scene after the shooting and turned himself into police nearly 2 weeks later after a warrant was issued for his arrest. He's facing a murder charge and was released from custody after posting a $500,000 bond. Prosecutors are accusing Finch of pulling a gun first, while the defendant's attorneys argued in court that their client acted in self-defense. Finch has a criminal history, including past burglary and drug charges, and is also facing an unrelated charge out of Collin County for being a felon in possession of a gun. Following his release on bond, Long's family began calling on lawmakers to enact bail reform laws which would ban violent offenders from being released from pretrial detention. They've created their own website dedicated to the cause and have vowed to fight for justice for both Ashlee and other victims. Number 9. Belinda Taylor. Just minutes before falling 15,000 feet to her death in a skydiving accident in June of 2025, 48-year-old mother of 4 Belinda Taylor made a joke about it being bad luck to jump on Friday the 13th. The tragedy occurred at Dunkswell Airfield in Devon, England, where Taylor's boyfriend, Scott Armstrong, found her body after the fall. Her instructor, 30-year-old Adam Harrison, also died in the fall. Taylor's 20-year-old son, Elias, told the Daily Mail that his mother had become more adventurous after meeting Armstrong, who had bought her the skydiving excursion as a gift. The grieving family is now focused on learning exactly what led to the tragedy. Harrison had worked as a skydiving instructor for 4 years leading up to his death. In a tribute, his sister extended her condolences to Taylor's family and reassured them that her brother would have done everything in his power to avert a crisis. The British Skydiving Board of Inquiry is investigating the incident, and authorities are declining to release any more details until an official report is completed. Number 18. Nolan Grove. In early April of 2023, teenager Nolan Donald Grove fatally shot his best friend, Kane Highland, in York, Pennsylvania's Red Lion neighborhood. The boys were hanging out with another friend when Grove removed his father's gun from its case and mishandled it until it went off, striking Highland in the back at close range. According to authorities, Grove made a joke about Highland's mother. Highland told Grove to shut up, and Grove proceeded to load and unload the gun several times. He also activated the laser sight, and the third friend later told police that Highland told Grove to take his finger off the trigger. Grove was reportedly overcome with guilt and regret over the deadly shooting, which his family has described as accidental. More than a month after the incident, prosecutors charged the teen as an adult with third-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, having a firearm without a license, and misdemeanor counts of firearm possession by a minor and recklessly endangering another person. More than 2 years later, the case is ongoing. Grove is currently free on bond, and public outrage over the case remains strong, with many calling for a merciless punishment while others express anger that the defendant's father has not been charged for allowing his son to get a hold of his gun. If convicted of the third-degree murder charge, Grove could face 20 to 40 years in prison, while the involuntary manslaughter charge carries a sentence of up to 5 years behind bars. Number 17. Shane Clarke. In June of 2019, 52-year-old Shane Clarke dialed 999 and confessed to stabbing his wife, 39-year-old Joanne Bishop, at the couple's home in the English city of Milton Keynes. During the conversation, he joked that he had just stabbed the missus while showing no remorse for his actions. Clarke could be heard laughing hysterically while telling the dispatcher that he thought Bishop was dead and that he didn't want to return to the crime scene. Emergency responders found Bishop clinging to life and rushed her to the emergency room. She had been stabbed 28 times in the chest and back with a screwdriver and died in the hospital 4 days later. Clarke pleaded guilty to Bishop's murder, and in September of 2018, he was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Number 16. Derrion Childs. In November of 2021, 21-year-old comedian Derrion "The Money" Childs was gunned down outside a Valero gas station in Memphis, Tennessee. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and died from his injuries, while a female victim suffered non-critical wounds. Childs had recently made several Facebook posts mocking the death of rapper Young Dolph, who had been shot 22 times outside a local bakery roughly a week earlier. While many speculated that Childs was killed in retaliation for his disrespectful words, authorities declined to comment on whether they believed this was the case. The slain comedian's sister told local station WREG that her brother wasn't mocking Young Dolph's death and that his words had been taken out of context. She explained that Childs was highlighting how bad crime had gotten in the violence-plagued city, and also mentioned that her brother had been acting differently in the days leading up to his death, almost as if he knew something was about to happen to him. Police released surveillance images of the suspects, but the case appears to remain unsolved. Number 15. Jordan McClanahan. 21-year-old Jessica White vanished in Troy, Michigan in April of 2016. More than a week later, 23-year-old Jordan McClanahan entered a local police station and confessed to strangling White to death with a belt. He also told law enforcement where to find the young woman's body. Officers had already searched McClanahan's residence but had not found White. They paid another visit to the suspect's Hazel Park home, where they found White's remains wrapped in a tarp and stuffed in a crawl space in his attic. The suspect had chopped off the victim's fingertips and engaged in intercourse with her deceased body. White's remains were reportedly unrecognizable when she was found. According to family members, she and McClanahan were friends, and he was the last person White had been seen with. When White's mother first asked McClanahan about her daughter's whereabouts, he claimed he had dropped her off in Detroit. Following the discovery of White's body, McClanahan was charged with first-degree murder and mutilation of a corpse. During his trial in early 2017, a former girlfriend testified that he had joked about being able to hide a body in a crawl space in his attic if he needed to. He was found guilty as charged and sentenced to life without parole. McClanahan appealed his case, arguing that he lacked the premeditation necessary for a first-degree murder conviction. The original verdict and sentence were upheld, and he remains in custody at the Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee. Number 14. Dellmus Colvin. No one knows exactly how many victims have died at the hands of 65-year-old convicted serial killer and former long-haul truck driver Dellmus Colvin, who has taken credit for dozens of killings. He was sentenced to 6 life terms plus 30 years after being convicted of 7 murders that took place in New Jersey and Ohio between 1987 and 2005. In 2020, Colvin participated in an interview with criminal profiler Phil Chalmers, which was aired on the podcast Where the Bodies Are Buried. He described how he strangled his victims to death and duct-taped plastic bags over their heads to ensure that they wouldn't regain consciousness. Colvin then drove around with his victims' bodies in the cab of his semi-truck, often crossing state lines before he found a place to dump them unnoticed. During the podcast, Colvin joked about how his victims were good passengers because they didn't bother him or complain about his music, and because he didn't have to share his food with them. When Chalmers asked about any victims whose remains hadn't been found, he unhesitatingly confessed to dumping a woman's body near an abandoned car wash in LaSalle, Illinois, and discarding her clothing in Iowa. Police searched the area based on Colvin's information and found skeletal remains that were initially thought to be human, but they were animal bones, and the victim's identity and whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. Number 13. Savannah Brockhill. In early 2020, child welfare authorities in West Yorkshire, England, began receiving reports from concerned friends and relatives of 18-year-old Frankie Smith, who was accused of routinely leaving her infant daughter, Star Hobson, with friends so she could go out partying. Just a few months earlier, Smith had broken up with Hobson's father and gotten together with Savannah Brockhill. The two women had a volatile relationship fraught with allegations against Brockhill of physical abuse, threats, and cheating allegations. Despite the couple's history and continued complaints regarding Hobson's well-being, social services did not revoke Smith's custody of the child. In September of that year, just a week after social workers' most recent visit to the home, Hobson was beaten to death while in Brockhill's care. During an autopsy, the medical examiner noticed evidence of older injuries, indicating that the victim had suffered prolonged abuse. While investigating the case, police found surveillance footage of Brockhill assaulting Hobson at a recycling facility where she worked. They also uncovered footage of Smith dragging her ailing daughter around in public by the child's reins 2 days before Hobson was killed. Smith received an 8-year prison sentence for causing or allowing the death of a child, while Brockhill was sentenced to 25 years to life for murder. In early 2022, news reports revealed that Brockhill had joked that she had buried 3 more babies to prisoners who were bullying her and spitting in her food out of disgust over her actions. She also reportedly said that the victims were buried in a field behind her house, which probably didn't make her life behind bars any easier, although no evidence was ever found of her being involved in any child killings other than Hobson's. Number 12. Dale Cregan. British cop killer Dale Cregan first made news headlines in September of 2012 when he lured Greater Manchester police officers Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone to a home in Hattersley, Tameside, with a fake burglary call. When the women arrived, 29-year-old Cregan shot them each at least 8 times with a Glock handgun before throwing a grenade at them, killing them both. At the time, Cregan was already wanted for the murders of 23-year-old Mark Short, who was shot to death in May of 2012, and Mark's father, 46-year-old David Short, who was killed in a shooting and grenade attack similar to the ambush that killed Hughes and Bone. About an hour after the officers were murdered, Cregan turned himself into police. He was charged with the murders of Hughes, Bone, and the Shorts, along with 4 counts of attempted murder. Cregan admitted to killing the police officers but denied the murders of Mark and David Short. During his trial in early 2013, prosecutors claimed that he had joked and laughed about killing David Short after keeping the victim captive for 2 weeks. An accused co-conspirator had told investigators that Cregan and another alleged accomplice, Anthony Wilkinson, had laughed at a family tribute to the Shorts that they saw on TV while on the run from the law. Cregan ultimately pleaded guilty to all 4 murders and received a whole life order, which means that he'll remain in prison until his dying day. Number 11. Ronaldo Hernandez-Padron. In January of 2025, the FBI's National Threat Operations Center received a tip from Instagram regarding an account belonging to 18-year-old Florida International University student Ronaldo Hernandez-Padron, who was accused of saying bad things are going to happen and threatening to bomb a house in a group chat with his friends. Following an investigation, the team was arrested at his Miami-Dade home and charged with terrorism and making written threats to commit a mass shooting. During Hernandez-Padron's first court appearance, his defense attorney insisted that the alleged threat was a joke, hoping the judge would grant a low bond. The lawyer chalked the defendant's actions up to youthful inexperience, adding that he was confident Hernandez-Padron had learned from the regrettable mistake. Following his release on bail after the hearing, Hernandez-Padron told reporters that the threat wasn't directed at anyone in particular and that it wasn't meant to be taken literally. He could face up to 15 years in prison if convicted as charged. Number 10. David Gaut. British child killer David Gaut was released from prison in 2017 after serving 32 years for the 1985 murder of a boy named Chi Ming Shek. Unaware that his freedom would be short-lived, he settled down in the Welsh town of New Tredegar, which is located about a half-hour's drive from where the killing occurred. On August 2nd of 2018, Gaut was lured to the flat of his next-door neighbor, 51-year-old David Osborne, where he was stabbed more than 175 times by 23-year-old Ewan Harley. Osborne, Harley, and a third suspect, 47-year-old Darren Evesham, were charged with murder following the discovery of Gaut's body 2 days later. According to prosecutors, the trio cut the fingertips off the victim's corpse, then carried it back to his flat and set his car on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Just hours before the crime, another neighbor, Kyle Alford, had discovered that Gaut was a convicted child killer. He told other residents among his block of flats, including Osborne, who appeared to be under the influence of alcohol at the time, and Harley, who was in the midst of a days-long amphetamine bender. Both men were reportedly furious over the nature of Gaut's crime. During the defendant's trial in 2019, Alford testified that Gaut had joked about his victim, stating that he didn't like Chinese takeout, but would have a Chi Ming Shek. Others told the court that Gaut had lied about his crime, claiming that he had killed a soldier. Darren Evesham and David Osborne were acquitted of murder, while Evesham was found guilty of perverting the course of justice by helping to cover up the crime. Ewan Harley was found guilty of murder and received a life sentence with a minimum of 24 years. Number 9. Stephen Castle. A long-standing grudge between two men in the English town of Tunbridge Wells ended in murder in October of 2024 when 59-year-old Stephen Castle strangled 54-year-old Wayne Woodgate to death and dumped his body in a wooded area. Prior to the discovery of Woodgate's remains, Castle was already a suspect in the man's disappearance. Police body cam footage would later show him joking that Woodgate was under his bed while officers inquired about the victim's whereabouts. According to authorities, Castle believed Woodgate had snitched on him to law enforcement 9 years earlier, resulting in a 7-year prison sentence for having illegal guns in his home. On the day of Woodgate's murder, the two men crossed paths for the first time in nearly a decade. Castle threatened Woodgate and forced him into a van, prompting concerned onlookers to call the police. By the time officers tracked the van to Castle's home, Woodgate was nowhere to be found. It was during this conversation that Castle joked about Woodgate being under his bed. He also claimed that he had dropped Woodgate off in town, but police didn't believe him, and he was taken into custody on suspicion of kidnapping. Castle initially bonded out, but was remanded back to jail and charged with murder following the discovery of the victim's body. He was found guilty at trial in 2025 and sentenced to life with a minimum of 25 years. Number 8. Carmen Rosa Solislerqux. In March of 2025, a 55-year-old swimming instructor from the Dominican Republic named Carmen Rosa Solislerqux was accused of saying she had a bomb in her bag while in line at Miami International Airport. According to a report, she made the alarming comment while refusing to consolidate her 3 bags at security's request. Solislerqux was removed from the line, questioned and searched by security, at which point she claimed she was just joking about the explosive. No contraband was found during the search, but employees reported the bomb comment to police, who arrested the woman on 1 felony count of false report concerning planting a bomb, an explosive, or a weapon of mass destruction, or concerning the use of firearms in a violent manner. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 7. Cop smokes cigar during arrest. In May of 2024, a police officer in St. Louis, Missouri, was filmed straddling a suspect and smoking a cigar outside the Marquee Restaurant and Lounge. In the video, the cop could be seen borrowing a lighter from a colleague while keeping his other arm on the suspect's chest. Onlookers and even the suspect himself also jokingly offered the officer a light. According to news reports, the unnamed officer was working a nighttime security gig at the venue when employees asked him to remove the suspect from the property. The suspect was arrested on suspicion of trespassing and resisting arrest, but public scrutiny focused far more heavily on the officer's actions. After the video surfaced, a law enforcement spokesperson revealed that an internal investigation had been launched to better understand the circumstances of the situation, what led up to the video, and the events that transpired after. Number 6. Omar Mateen. 49 people were killed and 53 others were wounded on June 12th of 2016 when a gunman opened fire inside the Pulse gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. It was the deadliest mass shooting in American history at the time, and to this day it remains the deadliest known act of violence against LGBT victims in U.S. history. The shooter, 29-year-old Omar Mateen, had behavioral issues and a fascination with violence dating back to childhood. As an adult, he struggled to hold steady employment. In 2007, he was terminated from his job as a corrections officer in training for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement after joking with an instructor about bringing a gun to school. The disturbing remark came just 2 days after 32 people were killed in the Virginia Tech mass shooting, resulting in the warden's decision to fire Mateen. Despite this and other red flags, Mateen managed to obtain a license to carry a concealed pistol. He passed a psychological exam to become an armed security guard, and the company he worked for chose to relocate him instead of firing him after he was removed from a courthouse position for threatening co-workers. Mateen also fell under investigation for suspected terrorism and was placed on a watch list in 2013 and 2014, but continued to legally carry a gun. During the Pulse nightclub shooting, Mateen voiced his allegiance to the Islamic State terrorist group, but the extent of his actual involvement with the group is unclear. He died in a shootout with responding members of law enforcement, and his exact motives for committing the massacre remain somewhat of a mystery to this day. Number 5. Kimberly Hricko. A romantic Valentine's Day getaway took a horrific turn for one middle-class Maryland couple in 1998, when 35-year-old Stephen Hricko was found dead in a rented cottage on the state's eastern shore. His face was burned, his pants were around his ankles, and there was a Playboy magazine in his hand. Stephen's marriage to his wife Kimberly was under strain at the time of his death. He had supposedly convinced Kimberly to give him one more chance after she asked for a divorce, and she claimed that the Valentine's Day trip was meant to help rekindle the spark between them. This version of events was challenged by Kimberly's co-workers, who told police that she had made her disdain for Stephen extremely clear in the year leading up to his death. One former colleague recalled Kimberly saying she wanted Stephen dead and asking him if he'd kill her husband for her. The witness later testified that he initially thought the woman was joking, but that it seemed evident based on her demeanor that she was serious. Prosecutors accused Kimberly of injecting Stephen with a paralyzing drug called succinylcholine, then pouring gasoline on his face and chest and setting him on fire while he was still conscious but unable to move. She maintained her innocence but was convicted of murder and arson and is serving a life sentence. Number 4. Joseph Roy Metheny. Serial killer Joseph Roy Metheny killed somewhere between 2 and 13 victims between 1976 and 1996. During that time, he lived in homeless encampments in the Baltimore area and frequently drank at bars while spending all his money on drugs and alcohol. Metheny took credit for more than a dozen killings but was only convicted of murdering Kathy Ann Magaziner, who was killed in 1994, and Kimberly Lynn Spicer, who was stabbed to death in 1996. In a confession that was posted online, he reportedly admitted to butchering his victims and opening up a sandwich stand where he sold sandwiches containing pork and the women's flesh. He also joked about being careful eating at roadside food stands because of the food he had sold. Metheny was initially sentenced to death but was re-sentenced to life without parole after challenging his case. He died in prison in 2017 at the age of 62. Number 3. Rowan Baxter. On February 19th of 2020, 44-year-old Rowan Baxter murdered his 33-year-old estranged wife, Hannah Clarke, and their 3 children, Aaliyah, Lena, and Trey. Clarke was driving the kids to school when Baxter doused the interior of her car with gasoline and set it ablaze. Bystanders pulled Clarke from the burning vehicle, but Baxter prevented onlookers from putting out the fire while the children perished inside the car. All 4 victims succumbed to their injuries, and responding officers also found Baxter dead at the scene. During a coroner's inquest in early 2022, attendees listened to an audio recording of Baxter joking around with a domestic violence hotline worker the day before the murders. He told a representative that he was seeking a specific cause to improve his position in family court after Clarke took out a restraining order against him. Baxter went on to claim that Clarke was playing games against him in court and coming up with as much dirt as possible to accuse him of violating the order. At one point during the call, the operator asked Baxter what state his suburb, Carindale, is in, stating that they had never heard of it. In response, Baxter laughed, said, "You have today," and specified that Carindale is in Queensland. He also complimented the representative's voice. Baxter told a sympathetic version of events, but he had a history of refusing to accept when a relationship is over. A woman he was married to before he met Clarke testified that she felt pressure to go back to Baxter because he wouldn't leave her alone after she tried to break up with him. He also had a history of being controlling and abusive toward Clarke, and his behavior escalated noticeably prior to the murders. The tragic case drew widespread attention to the issue of coercive control in relationships, and Clarke was posthumously named one of Marie Claire magazine's Women of the Year in December 2020. Today's topic was requested by Model Mummy 41080 and Industrial Hemp Rocks. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Levi Bellfield. British teenager Millie Dowler vanished in Surrey, England in 2002 after she was last seen leaving Walton-on-Thames train station. 6 months later, her murdered remains were found in a wooded area 25 miles from where she disappeared, but no arrests were made until late 2004, when a man named Levi Bellfield became a suspect in 2 other murders. Following his arrest, his ex-girlfriend Emma Mills told police that Bellfield had disappeared on the same day that Dalla went missing. When she confronted him about it, he reportedly joked in response, saying, "What do you think I've done, Millie?" Mills later said that she was disgusted by the remark, but she didn't report Bellfield's concerning behavior to law enforcement because she didn't think he was really capable of murdering the teen, even after he made the disturbing joke. She further explained that when she noticed bedding missing from the couple's flat, she assumed Bellfield had run off with another woman. In June of 2011, the jury found Bellfield guilty of Dalla's murder. In a rare decision reserved only for the most heinous crimes, the judge imposed a whole life order, condemning him to prison with no chance of parole. Number 1. Waylon Bailey. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020, sheriff's deputies swamped the Forest Hill, Louisiana home of 27-year-old Waylon Bailey with their guns drawn. They aggressively ordered Bailey to his knees and arrested him on a terrorism charge, which carries a prison sentence of up to 15 years. The raid came days after authorities in California began imposing stay-at-home orders, inspiring Bailey to make a satirical zombie-inspired post on social media. It stated that the Rapides County Sheriff had issued a stay-at-home order, and if deputies come into contact with the infected, they should shoot on sight. Believing Bailey was attempting to cause harm to someone, law enforcement sprang into action and executed the raid without a warrant. Authorities accused Bailey of spreading misinformation about the pandemic and hauled him off to jail. Even after he offered to delete the post and insisted that he only meant it as a joke, prosecutors declined to pursue the case, and in early 2024, Bailey was awarded a $205,000 settlement in a federal lawsuit against the Rapides County Sheriff's Office for violating his constitutional rights. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get slapped in the face by Will Smith or tell a racial joke in front of an audience made up entirely of people from the ethnicity the joke targets? Let us know in the comments section below.